Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers review. This isn't a morning briefing. We are looking at a player who very soon could be at Ibrox, Ridvan Yilmaz. To talk about him, a Turkish 21-year-old left back who I'm sure you've all heard about by now. I'm joined by Kaan. I was going to say Bayazit Kaan, but is it Bayazit? Am I right in saying that?
That's correct, yeah. But there's a lot of in Turkey they even say Bayazit a lot because usually it's written with an E rather than an A at the start.
Okay.
So don't worry too much about it.
Wasn't far off. Okay, so to introduce yourself, Kaan, you've just been telling me a little bit off camera about what you do. Your Twitter bio includes Besiktas Watcher, which is what qualifies you to talk about Yilmaz. But just want to tell us a little bit about what you do, what your involvement is within football and football writing.
I mainly focus on writing articles, and I'm writing mostly for the Japanese market, actually, where print media is still pretty big. The glossy magazines we all grew up with as kids, with the season previews and the World Cup previews and all that kind of stuff. I do that. I write articles and previews on Turkish clubs, the Turkish national team, Belgian national team, things like that. But I, of course, also do some podcasting or have done a lot of podcasting in the past, and I do interviews regularly. And this kind of stuff, I love doing this kind of stuff as well.
Well, it's great to have you. Thanks very much for coming on the channel. Now, we're going to talk about Ridvan Yilmaz, of course, because of his pretty strong links to Rangers at the moment. Lots of contrasting reports out there as to whether the deal has been agreed or not. But certainly by the time you hear this, he could well have been confirmed as a Rangers player. The interest is very much there and has been now public for a few days. If you just give us a bit of background, firstly, Kaan, on Yilmaz as a player, why he wants to move at this stage of his career, a little bit about what he brings as a profile, and what's the reaction within the fan base to him wanting to go at, because I think this is the last year of his contract. Is that right?
It's the last year of his contract, but I wouldn't put too much stock into that because Ridvan is, of course, an academy player. And I think it's more of a case of, is it worth renewing the contract if he's moving on anyway? It's not so much a case of they're selling because of it being this last year in this contract. I know that some clubs like to exploit that to get favorable deals, and rightfully so. Of course, Besiktas do the same thing with players in the last year of their contract, but that doesn't really apply here. Ridvan, throughout the transfer window, has worked very closely with the chairman of Besiktas to get a favorable deal for the club. And if a transfer wouldn't have happened this window, or wouldn't happen this window, I'm quite confident that he would extend his contract. In fact, there were extensions for both him and Ersin Destanoglu, his good friend from the academy, and they both were supposed to extend earlier in the year, but in Turkey they implemented something 2 years ago, which is a little bit similar to financial fair play, and because of that, they couldn't actually submit the paperwork because of the pay rises that Ridvan and Ersin were both standing to receive. So they had to put that a little bit on the back burner. But both of them have shown a willingness to and a lot of loyalty to the club. So I don't really think it's a case of selling now because it's the last year of his contract. It's more he has European ambitions. He wants to go to Europe. Initially, I think what he probably would have thought was a top 5 league, with Eintracht Frankfurt being very interested, Torino being interested. Unfortunately, a deal was reached actually with Frankfurt, but they couldn't agree on the payment installments. Besiktas wanted the majority of the transfer fee up front, whereas Frankfurt wanted to spread it out over a couple of a year or 2 years. I don't know exactly, but that was a little bit of an issue for Besiktas because, of course, for them, it's important now to get a replacement for Ridvan, and for that there needs to be cash.
Yeah, indeed. Tell us a little bit about what type of player he is. Rangers have been in the market for, well, not that long, because Calvin Bassey only left this week, but it's been known that he's been coveted by a lot of big teams, given his performances last year and his performance in the Europa League final. Yilmaz certainly fits that profile of a left back, seems to be quite dynamic, capable of being quite creative from that position. What type of player is he, and how has he fared at Besiktas in the last couple of seasons?
So he made his debut in 2019, just when he was about to turn 19 years old, a month before he turned 19. And he's made 61 official appearances since then. He's basically established himself pretty much as the starting left back over the last 2 seasons. Had to fight it out a little bit with Fabrice Ensakala the previous season when Beşiktaş won the league, and he also suffered an injury against Trabzonspor that kept him out for a while, and it took him also a little bit a while to regain his form. But what was noticeable is that the coach at the time, Sergen Yalçın, really seemed to prefer Ridvan in the big games. So he'd play Ensakala more often in the smaller matches, but in the big games against the rivals, Fenerbahçe, Galatasaray, Trabzonspor, he always seemed to prefer Ridvan Yilmaz, which says something if you prefer a then 19, 20-year-old fullback over a very experienced 30-year-old fullback. So yeah, he has the capability of defending. He's a good enough defender, pretty combative for his size. He's relatively pacey, he's not a speedster or anything. But he's also capable going forward. So he's a good mix of defensive and offensive ability. He has a lot of working points still. I think his crossing could still definitely become more consistent. But also in his youth career, was known to score the odd goal or so. And even now in those 61 games, he scored 4 goals, which is pretty good for a fullback. And then, of course, 7 assists, which is, probably average, I would say, for a fullback playing 60 odd games. Maybe 3 assists a season on average at the moment, but we don't have a massive sample size, of course, with only 61 games. But he is a good mix of both offensive and defensive ability, I would say. And I put this out there and asked my friends what they thought of this comparison, and maybe a little bit more of an offensive Gary Lineker, but then of course at the Gary Neville, excuse me.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, and more offensive Gary Lineker. Yeah, that's no. I was thinking, I was likening him because his stature, he isn't the tallest. Remind me a little bit of Neville at the time, especially when he was upcoming and younger in the early 1990s. And it reminds me a bit of that, but he is definitely a more threatening going forward, I would say. Neville was mainly a modest fullback, I would say. He's less modest, but he's a good all-rounder at the moment, but with plenty of room for improvement. Only 21 years old, of course.
Sure. We'll come on to that. What's interesting, what stands out to me there is you're saying he was chosen to play in the big games. Obviously, Besiktas is a big club with expectation and pressure from fans. Yeah. The Rangers support are a demanding bunch. You see them get to the stage of Europe they did last season. From the sounds of it, he's not going to be a player that's spooked by demands, responsibility, playing in big games. Do you think that's fair to say?
I've gotten that question a lot the last 2 days on Twitter from Ranger fans. And every time I get the question, I do, not condescendingly, but I do wonder, like, I don't think you are very up to date on what Turkish football entails, because I think if Turkish football is anything, it's passionate, and the pressure is on tremendously, especially if you play for one of the biggest Istanbul 3. There is constant expectations to perform. You have to win the league every year, basically. It's and if you don't, the media especially are absolutely unforgiving. The one advantage that Ridvan, of course, has had at Besiktas is that he's a youth academy product, and therefore the fans will be give him more leeway, and because he's one of ours, that kind of feeling. Sure. He won't have that at the Rangers, but I do believe that that for Ridvan, the pressure of Scottish football won't be a big issue. He's used to that type of pressure. I know it's very intense in the derby there as well between Celtic and Rangers, but that's believe me, the derbies against Fenerbahce and Galatasaray are equally intense, and I know how intense those derbies are in Scotland, but Turkey is crazy.
Okay, I'll take it from you, and certainly from seeing all the reports on Twitter, it does certainly seem like the media is, has a big influence on Turkish football over there.
Yeah.
Let's speak about potential. Sorry, let's speak about potential there. 21 years old, 61 games by this point. We've addressed the mentality thing. I think it's a very fair comparison to make in the magnitude of games that Yilmaz will be playing in Turkey compared to playing at Ibrox, and that I think will help him a lot, because there is players who maybe come up from smaller leagues or playing youth football, and it takes some time to adapt to the demands that are placed upon them in Glasgow. How far do you think he can go, Yilmaz? You were saying there that there was hope that he'd be able to go to one of the big 5 leagues. Do you think that's possible? Do you think this is he's seeing Rangers and looking at players like Barrie and Aribo who have went to the Premier League recently and saying, here's a club that can offer me a unique package, but ultimately his potential should take him to England, Germany, Spain, or somewhere like that?
Definitely think that's his career planning. I personally, and I've gone on the record saying that I think Ridvan, from the two of them, from Ersin Destanoğlu, who's the goalkeeper, and Ridvan Yilmaz, from the two, I think Ridvan is definitely the one that could have done with at least one more year staying at Beşiktaş. I think Ersin is much more ready to move on and has learned all he can in Turkey. So I think Ersin is much more ready for a step to the big 5 leagues in Europe. Whereas with Ridvan, like I said, another year at Beşiktaş would have probably been better for him. But I think that Scotland offers a unique opportunity in that, because he has the opportunity there to adjust to the more Western European lifestyle, hone his English, which will definitely be needed. He speaks some English, of course. He's a young man. This generation, they all have a certain knowledge of English, but he will definitely have to adjust, and he will have to improve his English. And I think for that, playing for a massive club like Rangers is a great opportunity for him, and a stepping stone, not necessarily in terms of league, but in terms of profile for not necessarily profile, but a shopping window almost, because of course the neighbors down south, the English, they tend to look within the Scottish Premier League a lot for targets, especially if you do well for Rangers or for Celtic. A move to the Premier League isn't far off. And I definitely think that is something that crossed Ridvan's mind, but also just the history. Tugay Kerimoğlu did really well at Rangers, and then moved on to the Premier League to do really well for Blackburn Rovers for many years. And I think something like that is also something that comes along. And of course, it's 20 years removed from that, but that definitely plays a factor. And of course, if you go from a club like Beşiktaş, then you don't want to go and play for a club where you're playing for 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 fans. Maybe you want to play for a club with equally passionate, an equally or even more passionate fan base. I'll leave that in the midst. But I think that Rangers is a very nice step in between for Ridvan. But you never know. Maybe it doesn't work out, or it does work out, and he just really likes Rangers and sticks around for 10 years. You never know. It can always happen. But I think the big question is going to be whether he can take that next step after Rangers. We'll have to wait and see. I really like Ridvan. I think he has a great mentality. He has improved a lot these last 2.5 seasons. I don't know exactly. I'm not a professional scout. I don't know how much more he can grow. I think there's still plenty of margin there, but if it will be enough for the Premier League, I don't know. I think he's not very tall. He isn't very wide. He's not insanely fast. He might miss the physical requirements to be to make it into the Premier League, but maybe he could do well in the Bundesliga or in Ligue 1 or in Serie A or something. There's or La Liga. La Liga might fit him better.
Lots of options. Well, just in closing then, so to round up, I think what you're saying is, his mentality, there's going to be no issues there. And I think you lay out a great case for why, based on his footballing experience so far, he will be able to adapt to the pressure and and that should be pretty seamless. Technically, obviously, he's going to be good enough to come in and play at Rangers. We can see that, or as you say, his career planning and as recent moves have demonstrated, Rangers can be a really good shop window for players who want to move to the Big Five leagues, particularly given their success in Europe last season. If I was to ask you now, Kaan, how do you think, presuming that Yilmaz does go to Rangers, how do you see the next couple of seasons mapped out? And I know that's putting you on the spot a little bit. How do you see it going? What do you see happening?
Well, I think, he's 21 now. He'll probably, if you plan out a career as a player, and he's definitely somebody who's thought about this. Not every player thinks about it. They're just interested about making the most money. But for Ridvan, that definitely isn't. Money isn't a main motivator. Otherwise, he would have had a big, fat, juicy contract already. He's been playing basically for peanuts for the last couple of years, and he hasn't in the slightest been a troublemaker because of that. Because other players would, throw a fit. But money definitely isn't the main motivator for him. He is very much focused on his career and doing the best thing for his career. So I think he's thought about this properly. Rangers will, in his mind, I can't look into what he's thinking, but I would imagine that for him it's a 2-year plan, and then by the time he's 24, that he 23, 24 maybe may take that next step. But I definitely think that it's not a long-term plan right now, but things change.
Sure.
If that's what you're asking, if you're asking.
No, absolutely, and I think you're right. Ultimately, where Rangers are in the footballing financial food chain, if you look around the world, the deals that they've done for Calvin Bassey and Joe Rebo, the club have put a lot of emphasis on the importance of buying players for the right price and selling them for the right price. So I think you're absolutely spot on with that. And just finally, Kaan, if people want to read more of your work, they might not be able to get their hands on the work that you do in Japan, but just generally, where can people find you on social media if they want to hear more from you?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter. I'm at Razzerian, RAZZERIAN. And I'll post updates on this transfer on there. But from very credible sources that I put a lot of trust in, the deal is pretty much done right now. I don't know what conflicting reports you guys are getting right now, but from this end, and they are generally the people that I have tweeted, not quote tweeted, but that I have sourced for the news today. Those two, especially the last one, is extremely reliable and has a very good track record over the last 2-3 seasons and has a good connection within the club. So he's not just going to tweet random stuff or put random stuff out there. So it does look like the deal is pretty much done. Some other Turkish sources are reporting already that he's going to fly over for a medical. Those are not the most reliable, but also not unreliable. It's difficult to say sometimes, to navigate the waters, especially with today's day and age with social media and everyone having exclusives. But generally, the two I sourced there are extremely reliable. So I think the likelihood of Ridvan joining Rangers in the next 48 hours is above the 90% mark at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. From what we've heard, the deal has been really close. I think the only confusion was maybe surrounding what the actual package was, which is maybe something that still is being finalised up until today and until the deal is signed on the dotted line. But very much looks like Ridvan Yilmaz will be a Rangers player. Thanks again to Kaan for some brilliant insight. Remember to go and follow him on Twitter. We'll be back tomorrow. Obviously, we're playing Tottenham Rangers. 3 o'clock at Ibrox. We'll speak to you then.